About the story of JL and JK, and really this is what we're looking at. This is JK and this is JL. So you'll see straight away the wheel nuts have gone considerably bigger and beefier. And if you come over here, I can illustrate it. So this is a JL axle. So when we put the new heavy duty bolt on, you can see you try and put the JK bolt onto it, it doesn't even go on. So a big improvement to strengthen the wheel hub assembly so that you can actually install bigger offset wheels than in the previous JK. The only thing that will shift between JK and JL is the wheel, and we've got the JL wheel on the JK here. You can still install that, but you cannot use the new JL bolts. You have to use, so that can be interchanged. So for those people with more power bead blocks, it is possible to transfer the more power bead block 17-inch from a JK onto the JL. That's the end of the story. Beyond that, there's nothing to transfer. Now we'll talk a little bit about the braking and wheel hub assembly on the JK versus JL. So this is your JK. It was a single piston caliper, right? And it was good to about 285. As soon as the tire was bigger than 285, the braking starts to fade. Now we'll go over here to JL, and what you will see is both the disc and the piston caliper has increased. In fact, the piston caliper is double piston. So there's two pistons here, so it's almost double the size of the old one, and the disc has increased substantially over the old one. In addition to that, you come around here. So if we look at the actual carrier for the disc and the whole bearing assembly, this is now aluminium. So this is one of the ways they've managed to achieve a reduction in weight. So it's a full aluminium casting. It's very beefed up, it's very heavy duty, but it does the job better than the previous one. Okay. Can you see a little bit from here, or is it difficult? Because the other thing I'd like to show is you now have a CV joint, not a universal joint here, don't worry about it. So we now have a CV joint instead of the old universal joint, so that makes it more smoother and quiet. Okay. So one of the big changes on the new front axle, Dana axles that comes in the JL, is the ability to disconnect the shaft, so that when you're in two-wheel drive on the road, this whole assembly, nothing turns. So if I just illustrate, by turning the tire normally, you would find the propeller shaft would turn. Because this device is here splitting it open, it's the equivalent of the old three-wheel hubs. The old cars, if you remember, used to go and turn it around. So this gives you better miles per gallon. It's quieter, smoother. JK system, solid axle. It's the Dana 35 in front. And one of the weak points was the axle tubing here, the longer section. It will often suffer slight bending as a result of off-roading, particularly if you had bigger wheels and tires, say over 33-inch, and in the case of heavy wheels, steel wheels, for example. So this is the old JK. Now we'll move over to the JL. Now on the JL, if you look at all the components, we'll start with the axle. So the axle has been upgraded almost by 1/4 of an inch. And the idea is that the whole suspension is built to take 35-inch tires. From the brakes, all the way through the half axles internally, to the differential unit itself, everything's been boosted up. All the arms, so the steering rods, if you look at the canard rod or track bar, everything's been upgraded. Again, substantially to take a 35-inch tire and wheel assembly. We're looking at the steering box here, and you can see the steering box is now aluminium. And more important is the connection to the steering system. It's got a massive bolt and pit arm assembly, again to take that force from a 35-inch wheel and tire assembly. Right, down there is the Electra hydro power steering system. Now this is a first in an SUV. So basically the hydraulic power steering system is no longer driven by the engine. It's driven by an electric motor, which gives you full power from the moment you start. The other advantage is it's connected to your speedo and your computer system. So as you go faster, the power steering is proportionately reduced to make the car feel significantly more stable. And that's one of the big things. Any JK driver driving a JL will feel the car is so much more refined. And the new Electro Hydro steering system is one of the big components in this. Right. So in the old JK, which we are under, you could see the exhaust system went right under the front propeller shaft. And this is a standard JK, so it hasn't been lifted and there's barely enough space to put my hand in. Alright, so the engineers at Jeep have addressed that on the JL. Now we're under the JL. What you can see is this whole area is being cleaned up. And look at the space now between the shaft and the exhaust. I can put my whole arm, not my fingers, my whole arm goes. So this will easily accommodate another 2, 4, maybe even 6 inches of lift as the angle starts coming down. Right, now we're under the rear axle, which again has been beefed up by quite a few millimeters. But more important is look at the track rod mount point. There's a massive tower that has been set up, so a lot stiffer, a lot heavier duty, okay? Which allows you to do a lot of things in the future, adjustable track rods, etc. You can take it. And if you look further up at the spring level, you can actually now see there's a reinforcement going all the way between the two spring towers. What this does, it strengthens the chassis and gives you a better feel of the vehicle as you're going over bumps. Okay? The other things you'll notice are things like the shock absorbers have been remounted. They're quite a bit longer and they're easier access. Okay? And of course the rear brakes, once again, on the rear axle has also gone up. It will only fit in a 17-inch wheel because it's a bigger caliper. It's still a single piston, but it's a far bigger caliper and a bigger disc. But the overall performance of the suspension in terms of wheel travel hasn't really changed much. It's the same solid axle, coil sprung, you know, off-road performance. One of the things you see is the brake lines have been rerouted. They used to come down from roughly there. Now they've been rerouted over here so that as you increase the lift, this still has enough flexibility to go all up. Because you can see now the suspension is fully extended and there's extra line and cable. One of the things that's also changed is because of this cross member, the cable, so the cable for the handbrake is above the cross member, which will probably limit lifts more than 2.5 inch. And then you'd have to find a way of bringing it directly from underneath the car. Maybe we can do just one clip on the engine. Yeah. Can you start lower this one and then lower this one, open the bonnet? Now this is the JK engine, 3.6 Pentastar. And now we move over to the JL. And you will see straight away that physically there is a difference. And that's intentional. So this is the 3.6 Generation 2. So what's happened in the Generation 2? There is almost nothing other than the block in this engine that's the same. Everything's been changed. Piston, rings, crank, hydraulic gear, everything. They've got a modest 5 horsepower out of it. They've got about 15 pounds of torque more. More importantly is they've improved the fuel efficiency of the engine. However, for all those JK users out there, you got to understand, this engine now has changed internally, so it uses a different oil. The old one, Generation 1, was using 5W30 semi-synthetic oil and 5 liters of it. The new one uses 4 liters of fully synthetic 0W20. So there is a more expensive oil, but you use less of it. And that's part of the redesign of the engine. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about a safety thing that we have to be careful of. it's a bit deceptive. You see one battery on the JL and you think it's the same as the JK. But the reality is, underneath the battery and the fuse box, there is another battery, because this car has start-stop, which is an emission requirement right now in European and American states. So when you disconnect the battery, the second battery for the start-stop is still connected. There'll still be power in the system. So we need to be very, very careful how you do it. You need people with expertise, like in the workshop. If you do it by yourself, you'll electrocute yourself, and you might burn out the electrics on the car. So one of the challenges has always been is if you're with an automatic and the engine dies for some reason and the car is in gear, how do you get it back into neutral? So now the engineers of Jeep have made it really easy. Just use your key and pop out. Let me try and get this one. Pop this out. There we go. You see there's a small hidden stowaway, and inside there's a nice little lever. If you pull this lever up, now the car is in neutral. And you can recover the car, tow it all the way back to the highway, and then if you want to put it back in, just tug it up again and it goes down. Now it's back into the park position. So that's a lovely little bit of engineering by the Jeep guys.
Should be in for a second.
So this is the Sahara with the 8-inch Uconnect system. The one we showed you earlier had the 7-inch, that was the Sport. Otherwise you end up having to do this always in the middle for the family. Now you've got the rear ducts, that hopefully fixes that situation. Okay, take the good with the bad. Ultimate Jeep Club.